Hello and welcome back to Joe Baylor Revision. Today we're going to be looking at the second part of the Making America, which is on the West from 1839 to 1860. So let's start. So an important part of the West is the Great Plains, and they're situated between the Rocky Mountains and the Mississippi River. Indian tribes moved to the Great Plains because of diseases, because the settlers brought diseases that the Indians couldn't treat, because of hunting, because after trading with the Spanish, Indians could hunt buffalo as they had horses. So great herds of buffalo roamed the plains, so they'd constantly be able to get food and supplies from the buffaloes, riding their horses around and catching them. Due to conflict, because Indian tribes fought and subtraded with settlers for guns, so the others would have to flee further west to the plains. So let's look at the Lakota Sioux. So they're an example of a tribe of Indians who lived on the plains. They lived in teepees and were nomadic, meaning they'd travel around to lots of different places on the plains. They hunted buffalo. They only had to do this a few times a year because of how much they'd get from one thing of hunting. So, for example, one hunting party brought back 1,400 buffalo tongues. So they're highly good and efficient at collecting these buffalo. Hunting buffalo was used for clothing, food, and shelter. Basically, everything they needed to survive, they found some way to make it out of the buffalo. And before hunting buffalo, they performed something called a buffalo dance, where they asked the spirit world for a successful hunt. So that links to their beliefs. They had a lot of beliefs. So they believed in the Great Spirit, which is known as Wakantanka. They believed that all living things had spirits. And because of this, they thought that land couldn't be owned. That farming was disrespectful, as it's wrong to treat badly the land that you've been given. That would be wrong because it's all a living thing, and you shouldn't mess with it like that. You shouldn't abuse it. So here's a quote from an Indian. He said, "We cannot sell the lives of men and animals. Therefore, we cannot sell this land. We cannot sell it because it doesn't belong to us." That's from Crowfoot, who was chief of the Blackfeet in 1885. So this sort of tells us about their beliefs. They thought, you can't sell people's lives, so why would you sell the land? It's got life itself. It doesn't belong to anyone. It can't belong to anyone. So next, let's look at their warfare. So the Lakota Sioux had many warrior societies. So in this, they trained warriors, hunters, and they'd police the community. Each warrior society would have individual customs, songs, costumes, and dances. And in the warrior societies, they'd have a strong sense of honour. They use these things called coup sticks to show their bravery. The sort of things they'd run up to people with them, and they wouldn't actually fight them, and it'd just show how brave they are because they'd just run back again and they'd be fine. They had rivalries with other tribes, such as the Crow and the Pawnee tribe. They fought to steal horses and hunt on land. So they fought to get certain land they'd be allowed to hunt on, and they fought to steal horses. They wouldn't farm on the land because they didn't believe in that. So next, let's look at mountain men. So the mountain men were some of the first whites to travel across the plains, of course, after the Lewis and Clark expedition. They were important for the further settlement of the West because they told people about the great land in the West and how great it was, and they understood the land, trails, and terrain. So they understood what everything was like there, so they could tell people how to get there. Because they were some of the first people, they lived in cold, harsh conditions, and to survive, they hunted beaver and elk, which they often traded with the Indians, which helped build a relationship with the Indians and not feel too bad about them. So some people were actually trying to trade with them instead of just kicking them out like earlier. So next, let's look at reasons to move west in the 1840s. So there were many pull factors and push factors. So let's start with the push factors. So there was a financial crisis in 1837. This led to a loss of jobs and savings for many people, which made a few think that they had nothing to lose, so they'd already lost everything, so they decided, we're going west to start a new life. There was mass immigration in the 1840s, which made the cities and stuff in the east a lot more crowded, so farmers had less land available, and they decided there's more land in the west, so they decided to move there. Pull factors, there was advertisements which idealised the west, saying it was great hunting land and it was perfect for farming, which was often evidenced by mountain men and explorers, would often to be thought of like important people and good people who you could trust, people of authority. The 1841 Preemption Act was passed, and this meant that the first person to build a house and clear trees on a piece of land could buy that land if they had the money, and they got the first chance to do that. No one else could. There was, of course, Manifest Destiny, which was the right and duty to spread both Christianity and the American way across the plains and with people that they considered to be uncivilized, like the Indians. So next, let's look at the journey west. So there were two official routes west, which was the California Trail and the Oregon Trail. Emigrants visited Forts Laramie and Kearney for rest, water and supplies along the trails. They started at Independence, Missouri. They faced a lot of problems along the way, however, such as Indian attacks, which led to 3 of the Sega kids getting killed, diseases, which were spread by poor sanitation, such as dysentery, diphtheria, and measles, and diseases caused by drinking dirty water, such as typhoid fever and cholera, and they'd often have to do this because sometimes they wouldn't take enough supplies, so they'd run out of water and they'd have to drink that. Some example of some people who were killed by diseases is Henry and Naomi Sager in 1844, as they were travelling across that way. Also, extreme weather led to people getting hurt and not reaching their destination, so thunderstorms and heavy rain, and there was also heavy snowing in winter, and this led to the Donner Party getting lost as their wagon got caught in the snow in 1846, so they couldn't move their wagon anymore because it couldn't travel in that deep snow, so they got stuck and starved and had to turn to cannibalism, and most of them ended up dying due to that. So next, let's go back over here and let's look at the Mormons. So in 1830, Joseph Smith published the Book of Mormon, which he claimed to have written the book from sacred golden plates that he was told to find by an angel that visited him called Moroni. And by 1831, the Mormons had 1,000 followers and set up many colonies in Missouri. And a lot of people hated the Mormons. There were a lot of reasons for their hatred, or reasons they used to say why they hated them. So things such as their beliefs. So they believed that Jesus came to the United States. Their attitude to others. So they would say that anyone who was smoking, drinking, or gambling was doing something against God, which you can see why that would annoy a lot of people, as they thought, this is perfectly fine doing this. But the Mormons would disagree with it. They were very successful. They set up Nauvoo, which was the largest city in Illinois, which was self-governed, rich, and had an army of its own. They also believed in polygamy and allowed it with some of the higher-ranking members, which would have annoyed a lot of people due to their own beliefs. The treatment of Indians and slaves. They freed slaves and converted Indians, which would have annoyed other people in the East and other settlers, as they didn't agree with that sort of thing. They think you can't convert an Indian, they are savages, or you shouldn't free slaves because they deserve to be there, that sort of thing. There was also a lot of prejudice against them. For example, they were labelled public enemies. There were a lot of attempts for them to be executed by the army, and also clergymen called the Book of Mormon blasphemous, meaning that high-ranking members of the church would say that, and that would change a lot of people's beliefs as they'd follow their every word. So next, let's look at Salt Lake City. So Salt Lake City was founded in 1817, and it was where the Mormons went to. The Mormons fled due to prejudice and to be away from the US so they could decide their own rules and that sort of thing. They faced many problems setting up, but they had lots of different ways to solve them. So arguments over land ownership could have been a problem, but to solve this, all land was owned by the church and it was given out to people individually based on what they needed. They had a lack of people, and they fixed this by sending out missionaries to other continents to convert people to Mormonism. And they did this using something called the Perpetual Emigration Fund, which paid for Mormons to reach Salt Lake City, particularly people who wouldn't have the money to reach there otherwise. They had a lack of water when it was founded, because it was founded on a salt lake, so they dug irrigation ditches and this fixed it. An important event that happened, including the Mormons, was the Mountain Meadow Massacre. And this is where non-Mormon emigrants were attacked by Indians, and 7 emigrants died. And the Mormons killed all other emigrants who were in that wagon trail, which was over 100 of them, to avoid bad news spreading about people dying on the trail around where they lived, around Salt Lake City. And then they blamed the Indians for the attack on over 100 of them when the people in the US found out, when the other settlers, and the US Army was sent to fight the Mormons because they figured out they did something wrong. However, there was a peaceful solution, and Utah was given a non-Mormon governor, and this would have a big impact on them, as everyone there was Mormon, and if the governor was non-Mormon, that would take away a lot of Mormon control over the state around that area. So next, let's look at the gold rushes. So let's start with the California gold rush, as that was the first gold rush. Gold was discovered in California in 1848. And this led to mass migration in 1849. Over 50,000 people arrived from America, Europe, China, and Mexico. And this would eventually cause California to become a state in 1850. And the settlement of California caused the creation of many treaties, such as the Fort Laramie Treaty, which meant that the whites could enter Indian territory. Also, about the Californian gold rush. Most people were disappointed when they arrived there, worked in terrible conditions, struggling to survive. Most mining operations over time began to be run by huge companies, so people wouldn't get much from it. And also the rush ended very quickly, meaning that there wasn't actually that much gold there. The people who arrived there first got all the gold, and then there was no gold left for everyone else. So it wasn't a very good journey for them. So next there was the Pikes Peak Gold Rush. And this started in Colorado, which was the center of the plains, which meant it was much safer than going to California. So you wouldn't have to travel as far. So it was close to travel to, and you don't have to cross the Rocky Mountains, which were in between California and most of the places people were living. And also the land was under government protection because it was considered a territory and would later become a state. Many went there due to the 1857 recession. Town boosters often lied about routes, telling people it was easy, so they wanted people to move there. Mining towns grew, and farms in Kansas grew to support these mining towns, to support these miners. So both of the places would grow. This led to Kansas becoming a state in 1861, and the western part of it was named Colorado, which was the place where people originally found the gold. So these two places both became a state around the same time. The Great Plains became considered as a place to live, not just a place to travel past, as they thought they could live there. And cities like Denver were set up there, which were also on Indian land, because a lot of around there was Indian land, which made the US government finally believe that coexisting with the Indians wasn't possible, as they wanted the land for their cities. They didn't want the Indians traveling around all of it and taking up a lot of space. So yeah, that was gold rushes, and that was the West. So thank you and goodbye.